Okay. All right. All right, there we are. Tommy, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
You got me. All right, perfect. All right, I see some people are still joining as we're getting ready to get started here, but we want to get underway as we've got about an hour for our special conversation with Tommy Stella tonight. So as you can see, we have a bunch of current Green Knights, Tommy. We have future Green Knights signing in and hopping on board here, and I know they're anxious to ask you questions and talk baseball and sports and St. Joe's with you. So I just want to introduce you formally to everyone on here in our audience tonight. So, of course, my name is Ryan Aselta. I'm the Director of Admissions at St. Joseph Regional. I've met many of you who are on here tonight to listen in and hear what Tommy has to say. So Tommy Stella is a graduate from St. Joe's of the class of 2007. He went on to play college baseball at St. John's University and then at Coastal Carolina University. He was then drafted into the major leagues by the Atlanta Braves back in 2011. Since then, Tommy has played for the Braves, the Cubs, the Angels, the Athletics, and now the San Francisco Giants. He won a World Series in 2016 while a member of the Cubs and was a Major League All-Star in 2019. And Tommy is kind enough to be with us tonight as, like we said, we're going to talk baseball, the art of being a professional, whether that be athletics or any career you maybe see yourself going out into, and of course talk about St. Joe's. And Tommy, thanks so much for doing this and being with us. I guess the first question I would ask you tonight is, when you think back many, many years ago, we're talking, 2007. So we're talking a good 15 years ago since you graduated from St. Joe's. How did your time at St. Joe's prepare you for this career path that you ultimately ended up on?
That was huge. I originally went to St. Joe's with the intention of pursuing an athletic career, and the opportunity to play at a school like that, to play among the best competition in the area was something that was always appealing to me. And getting to St. Joe's and being in that atmosphere and that environment was huge for me developmentally. And the friends you make there, and I'm sure you can attest to this, the friends I made over those 4 years will be the friends that I keep for the rest of my life. And it taught me so much about brotherhood and teamwork and collaborating, all lessons that set me up in a good way going forward to be able to pursue this career. And St. Joe's was invaluable to me.
So Tommy, you're coming to us, I believe you're coming to us from Seattle. Is that where you are? Is that home for you right now?
Seattle. Yeah, we're out here on the West Coast.
So on the West Coast, in the current off season right now. And I know a lot of guys have a lot of questions that they're going to ask you tonight. For all you guys that are on here, and I know we have some parents on here as well, and you're welcome to ask Tommy some questions. The best way to do that on this session is in the Q&A button in your Zoom screen. So on your panel below, if you click on the Q&A, you will be able to type in a question, and then I'm going to get those questions to Tommy throughout the next hour. And we have some already sent in from some of the guys that are eager to ask some questions. And as this night goes on for the next hour, we're going to rapid fire some questions at Tommy so he can help us with answers to those. So I guess if thinking back to St. Joe's too, Tommy, you talked about what your goals were when you were looking to go to St. Joe's and the athletics and obviously baseball. How about some of the things you learned while you're there, academic side, being part of the St. Joe's community? Obviously you matured as a young man at St. Joe's. You came in as an coming out of eighth grade, 13, 14 years old, you left as a man. What was that like? What did you learn about St. Joe's in as far as just growing up as a teenager?
I mean, it was the culture there is so strong, for lack of a better word. And I remember going into it being worried about basically pulling double duty and being an athlete and being a student. And what the workload was going to be like. Was I going to be able to handle it? Um, and I immediately felt from the staff and the teachers and everybody there that they were always going above and beyond to help out with whatever I needed, and not just me, but my friends and other student athletes, because it's a lot. And just having their support in that way was huge, because it's not an easy thing to do. And when I needed extra help, there was always somebody there to offer it. And if I wasn't understanding something, I could always go to somebody, and I felt confident that they were going to help me out, and like it was going to be okay at the end of it. And I know that for a kid who's like you said, at that age, it's hard enough, and to have that support system around me was huge. So just the environment there is so helpful in so many ways. And I think the thing that always stands out to me is just like the camaraderie, the brotherhood. All of that is fostered in a way at St. Joe's that I don't know that you get it at other places. It was the best 4 years of my life, and me and my friends all joke about it all the time. If we could sign up and today and go back for 4 more years, we would immediately do it. I mean, it was that type of time for us, and it's a special place.
How about athletically, Tommy? On the baseball field, you came in as a young baseball player. You left as a player ready to go play Division I college baseball. How did you develop over those 4 years, and what did you learn at St. Joe's when it came to some of the ins and outs that made you a successful baseball player?
Yeah, the program is so consistent in St. Joe's. So I had the benefit of being around some really talented guys, and guys who taught me how to work. And that was something that I think really helped me in the beginning as a freshman. And then I was actually fortunate enough to be on the varsity at my sophomore year. And again, just the guys that were there, I was lucky enough to play alongside Brent Weiss. I don't know if you remember that name, but the shortstop, he started 4 years on varsity as a shortstop, which was pretty much unheard of at that program. And yeah, so the guys around me I was really fortunate that they kind of had a culture and an atmosphere around them that it was easy for me to come into and pick up on the work and do everything that I needed to continue to get better. I was one of the younger guys on the team, but the coaching staff and all the older guys were really helpful and supportive.
Yeah, I think that's something that students may overlook when they're looking at schools like St. Joe's. We the eighth graders coming in, they're the athletic program, who you're going to play against. I think what Tommy is mentioning here is who you're going to play with is what raises your level. Playing with high level teammates makes you a better player. You're around talent, you absorb that. I think that's what Tommy was saying over his 4 years playing with those type of guys while he was at St. Joe's. I want to work in our first question from one of our students. This is actually, Tommy, from an incoming student, from Tommy Polowitz, SJR class of 2026. So he's currently an eighth grader, and he will be a Green Knight next year at St. Joe's. Tommy wants to know, what was your experience with regard to club travel baseball in this early baseball journey? And what advice would you give a young man in balancing or weighing individualized baseball skill development versus private lessons versus the huge commitment of playing in constant travel tournaments? I think a lot of these athletes can relate to, they're busy, and there's a lot of ways to play baseball right now. What did you do, kind of balancing that at that age in high school?
Yeah, well, firstly, Tommy, congratulations on St. Joe's. You're going to love it. And it's a really good question. It was a little different back when I was in high school as opposed to how it is now. There's so many more options for guys, and so many more teams and so much more travel. I was a little bit involved in the AAU circuit. I did some tournaments down in Georgia and South Carolina. And, there's that fine line of, you want to get that type of scouting exposure from the colleges and hopefully professional scouts if you're fortunate enough in high school, but also to, as you mentioned, balance that workload with all the other things that you're going to have going on in your life, school, and any other commitments that you have. And I do think it's important to you can go into this fully and really pursue it all the way, but also have other interests that you're pursuing too that are going to balance it out, and that you don't just become so one track minded. I ultimately think it helps in getting away from the game at times, and then when you pick it back up, like, it's a little bit fresher. The monotony of it, the constantly working at one single thing, it can be difficult to get a fresh take and a fresh perspective at times when you're just in it all the time. So I think having other things that are interests that you can pursue at times, it actually helps with baseball, as counterintuitive as that might sound. But it is, roundabout way of saying there's no easy answer for that. I think it's, what every guy is comfortable with. And to be honest with yourself, if you feel like you're approaching that limit where you're like, okay, I'm starting to get that burnout feel, maybe it's time, and to not necessarily look at that as a weakness, or I'm not dedicated if I'm feeling this way, because you're not always going to love it. That's the one thing that, anybody who's been in this long enough can tell you, is that, like, you're not always going to feel good about going out there and doing it. And it can be a love-hate thing at times, because, you're dedicating so much of yourself to it. But to be honest with yourself, when you need a break and it's time to gear back a little bit and get into something else, I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, that is some great advice there that hopefully these guys are hearing that. And thank you for sharing that. I know that you're personally, you've gone through that. You gone through that at high school, and being able to share it with these guys who are in it right now or getting ready to be there is huge for these guys. We have a question from James Griglio. James is going to be a member of the St. Joe's class of 2026, also a future Green Knight. James wants to know, Tommy, what was your plan B? If you couldn't make it as a major leaguer, what did you want to do instead?
I didn't really have a plan B, and I don't advise that. I don't think it's, it is one of the things that I regret, just because, as I was mentioning earlier, I think it helps to be a little bit more well-rounded. I kind of pursued it with just that in mind. And I decided from a pretty early age that was what I was going to go for. As far as what I would have done, I really don't know. Like, my parents are doctors. I think that's a little bit above my academic skill set. So I don't think that would have been an option for me. But I think that, ultimately something in baseball, whether it was coaching or teaching it, I loved the game for so long, and that kind of made sense to me. So whether it was in a playing capacity or teaching capacity, I think it would have been something along those lines.
Okay, some great questions already pouring in. Remember, guys, if you want to ask Tommy a question, just type it in the Q&A portion of the Zoom. I do have some questions lined up that we're going to get to, and some other questions that were sent to us. So we're going to keep those going with Tommy. I'm curious, Tommy, so it kind of feeds off of that. Your parents, your doctors, the mental side of being a professional athlete has grown in importance, I think, in the last 10 to 15 years. I'm curious, can you share how you prepare yourself and prepare your mind to perform at the highest level?
Yeah, I think it's kind of an ever evolving approach. At least I haven't found any way that you arrive at a point where you're like, I've got it, and this is how I'll always approach it going forward, and it'll never change. I've certainly hit that point multiple times, and then it always changes, which I think is fine. I think mentally, just, well, being honest with myself about where I'm at and how I'm feeling. It's understanding that truthfully, and where my body is at, where my mind is at, has allowed me to know what I have to give that day. I've gotten into trouble at times in my career where, my body was feeling a certain way, but, that old mindset of, I can't give into that type of idea. And then, when I could have, dialed it back a little bit and been at 80%, I end up going out there and trying to go at 100% just out of stubbornness. And then, something goes wrong. So I think, just being able to be honest with yourself and has been a learning process for me, because it's not always easy to be honest with yourself. You're out there and you're going as hard as you can. And You don't really want to dialogue with that voice in your head that tells you might need to dial it back a little bit. But I think over time you do develop the ability to have that internal conversation, and to end up kind of in the middle ground of the side of you that's telling you you can take more and you can push more and the work's not done, and the side of you that says, okay, but we've been grinding away at this for 2+ hours, whatever it is. And one thing that I think a lot, when I'm in those moments is, like the strongest strong man in the world, drops the bar on every set that he does. He stops. You have to. It's impossible to just work forever. And so knowing, where your limits are and to be able to push up against them and to ultimately push a little bit past them at the same time, but also to be realistic that like rest and recovery and stopping is equally as important to that process and is ultimately what allows you to go and continue to push further. And I think secondly is just what's been helpful for me is growing my attention span as best I can. Just the ability to focus for prolonged periods of time without fatiguing. I do kind of look at it like attention being like a muscle and that you can train it. And I didn't always have it, and I'm always trying to work to develop it further. But in those moments where you're tired or the game's just like bearing down on you, and it's not always going to be easy, and your mind's going to want to take you somewhere else, and the ability to push through that and focus through that and to grow your attention span has been really helpful for me. It hasn't been easy, but it has been pretty helpful.
Curious, just a quick follow up on that, because that's very interesting, especially in this day and age where everyone has a lot of things going on and a lot of availability of things that can distract them, whether that's a device or busy environments. How do you train yourself that? How do you train yourself to expand that attention span?
I think a lot of it for me has come from breath work, breathing properly. And it's not a sexy answer, but it is what I've relied on. And breathing is not really just as simple as like in and out, but there is a way to breathe that doesn't kind of disrupt your mental clarity or for me, the easiest way to relate it is when I'm at the plate, I want to be breathing in a way that is gentle enough that I'm not disturbing my visual field. I think we've all kind of been in that moment where like you're breathing heavily after cardio or you're breathing heavily after some strenuous exercise, and you get kind of like that throbbing of your vision. It's subtle, but like you do kind of notice it if you've ever been in that place. And at the plate, it's a really fine line between, you've got all this adrenaline moving through you, but you've got to be able to breathe calmly enough that you don't start to get like that visual distortion to still pick up a moving object at 95 miles an hour and be able to square it up. So it's not easy when the adrenaline's, surging through you like that in those moments to maintain good breathing. But, as I was saying before, just the ability to focus on it and hold my attention on it and to really even it out and smooth it out has been quite helpful.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Let's get to some questions, Tommy. They're starting to pile up here. I've got a question from Elliot Santiago. Elliot's going to be a member of the class of 2026, so a future Green Knight. Elliot wants to know, what was your most memorable moment playing baseball at St. Joe's?
Wow, so many. I would say sophomore year winning the county tournament at Demarest. I'm actually from Closter, so Demarest is the regional high school I would have gone to had I not gone to St. Joe's, and the county finals were held there every year. And that team was special. They had so many veteran guys: Rocco Bergen, Steve Caceres, Jason Koziol, Brent Weiss, all guys who had just been leaders of the program for at least 2 to 3 years, and to just step in on that team and play my role and to be a part of that championship was definitely probably my most memorable moment.
All right. So we had a question from Josh Friedman. So Josh is a current Green Knight. He's a baseball player at St. Joe's. Josh wants to know what your favorite major league memory was besides winning the World Series. Figuring that maybe is tops on your list. do you have another moment that sticks out besides winning the whole thing?
Yeah, I'd say probably my debut at Fenway back in 2014 with the Braves. That was pretty special. I was, being from the Northeast, my whole family was able to make it up for that. And a lot of guys aren't so lucky. They get the call and their families, across the country, whatever it is, and that they're not able to be there for it. But I was fortunate enough that mine happened in the Northeast, and I mean, to make your debut in Fenway Park, and I'm pretty sure it was against the world champion Red Sox at the time. And I'm standing out there, and it's like, I'm playing against David Ortiz and Dustin Pedroia. I'm like, where am I right now? And then second night, so not my debut, but second night, made the game losing error. So that was pretty cool as a nice welcome into the big leagues. But yeah, I would have to say debut at Fenway was pretty memorable.
Hey, memorable, good and bad, I guess you can say.
You got to take it all.
Really memorable, I bet. We got a question from Matteo Bosco. Matteo, despite his last name, he is going to be a Green Knight. He's a member of the class of 2026. And Matteo wants to know, he said he's an upcoming freshman. He's trying to make the freshman baseball team next year. What did you do to prepare to move on and move up towards the next level of baseball that was ahead of you in high school?
Yeah, I think good instruction was pretty important for me. I think going into St. Joe's was, just being able to be around, somebody who had good things to offer me as far as hitting and defense. That was really important going into my freshman year. And then, once I was at St. Joe's, I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by a really good coaching staff. One guy that really sticks out to me is Steve Hayward. He really taught me so many things that I brought with me in my career. And, I continue to go back and work out with Steve's every off season. And we've been working together for so long. But I think, having somebody outside of yourself who can offer you some perspectives and some tips, I think that's valuable. It doesn't have to be, some well-renowned instructor, but just somebody who knows what you're working on and can maybe work at it with you, I think is helpful to get a different perspective.
All right. We've got a question from Michael Aselta. Yes, the name rings a bell. He's a future Green Knight, member of the class of 2026. Michael wants to know, Tommy, how do you motivate yourself to practice things that may not be fun, but you need to work on to be successful?
Really good question. And there's no short answer to it. It's kind of, as I was saying before, like, you're not always going to love it. And that's, the longer you do it for, and I'm sure you guys even experience it in eighth grade and freshman year, like it's not always easy to go out there and do it when you're tired or you got other things on your mind. I think that it's okay to hate it sometimes. I think that's perfectly normal. And I think to be able to allow that to be the case and to not just run from it and be like, well, now I hate it and I'm going to move on to something else. But to be in a difficult moment with it and allow that to be the case, but to also still go out there and give what you have to give. I mean, if what you have to give that day is 50% and you're honest with yourself and this is where I'm at, then give your 50% and, move on to the next day. But to be able to be honest with yourself in those conversations that you have where, yeah, I'm really hating it right now. And it's, what is it because of other things that I have going on in my life, or is it because this thing has really run its course for me right now and I'm kind of feeling more drawn to other things? I think the more you check in with yourself, the easier it is to have those conversations with yourself and to know what each voice sounds like, for lack of a better way of putting it. Because there's a difference between, man, I'm fatigued and I've been grinding away at this for, 6-8 months, whatever it is. And, I could really use a break versus like, okay, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And I'm not enjoying it nearly as much as I would have hoped. Obviously you're not going to enjoy it every moment, but really the enjoyment isn't being outweighed by the dread or whatever it is. And to be able to have that conversation and be honest with yourself, because it's not always going to feel good.
Yeah. I think you said that even before we got to that question. It's not always fun, but
yeah.
You have to navigate your way through that. We have a similar question from Emilio Liriano. Emilio is a current freshman, so St. Joe's Green Knight class of 2025, and our varsity baseball coach, Coach Mark Cieslak, is also on here tonight, and they both have the same question. They want to know, did you play baseball year-round when you were in high school, and do you agree with playing baseball year-round, or should some of these guys take a little bit of time off or try something else for a season?
Another good question. I played football my first 2 years at St. Joe's. I stopped before my junior year and focused solely on baseball. But stopping football for me wasn't. It was more like I was pretty beat up. I had played tackle football from a really young age, from when I was 5. So I had already played, more tackle football as a sophomore than most of the guys on the team, even as seniors. And I was pretty beat up from it and pretty burnt out. At the same time, I don't think it was any more beneficial for me to strictly just focus on baseball. I do think that training, one of the things that I noticed when I stopped playing football was some lateral quickness, and some just like kind of top end speed was not as tightly trained as it was when I was playing football and practicing consistently. So I do think kind of like cross training is helpful, and engaging your body in different ways can be beneficial for baseball, and just like overall athleticism, being a well-rounded athlete, doing different movements, I think is really beneficial. So in answer to the question, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's some people who would disagree with that and say, yeah, focus strictly on baseball, you'll get the most out of it. But I also see it the other way, that training in multiple sports, multiple areas is also beneficial when you pick up the bat again.
All right. Question next is from Gabriel Rios. Gabriel is going to be a future Green Knight class of 2026. He wants to simply know, Tommy, how did you feel when you won that World Series? What was that like?
It was pretty special. It was like, it almost felt like being in a movie as it's being written. There was so much anticipation for that World Series for the Cubs. And just to be there and see it all as it was unfolding. And I didn't have, I was on the bench. I didn't have any of the pressure that those guys took on to win that series for that city. But, even just being able to be there and be a part of that group was incredible. I mean, the Cub fan base is just like, they were so hungry for it, and they're so loyal and so dedicated. To be able to bring it home for them was just like incredible. I mean, the parade was, as far as you could see down all of these city streets, people like, who were never even going to be able to see our buses going by, but just wanted to be able to be there to show their support. And it was incredible. Cub fans are the absolute best. And that World Series was something else.
Yeah. Our next question is from Tony Bossalina. And Tony wants to know, Tommy, what's your pregame routine? Stretching, arm care, things like that. What do you do on a day-to-day basis when you're in that grind of a 162 game season?
Yeah, another good question. I think everybody's a little bit different. For me, I'm trying to check in with my body pretty much when I wake up that morning and just see where it's at. And just familiarize myself with it. Like, okay, I was feeling this last week and it turned out to be this. Well, okay, we'll kind of bookmark that in my mind. It's like, all right, I need to go in and get some treatment on my hip flex or whatever it was that worked. But just always checking in physically and see where I'm at. And then, just as kind of like a general routine, I'm in the beginning to get it going. I want to spin the blood. Some cardio, right around like 8 minutes of cardio, just to get like a light flush, and like a light sweat going. That way, everything's got some blood flow and things are generally on before I go. And then I foam roll or roll out my feet or anything that I'm going to do. I want to get the blood spun a little bit. And then I'd say a big thing for me is activation, just turning everything on. I think stretch for me, I definitely stretch pregame and before I go out for batting practice. But mostly I want to make sure that everything is activated. So some light tension on the muscles, not just like from a stretch perspective, but from a contraction perspective. And then I think post game is more focused on stretching out the muscles and lengthening back out as before I go into recovery at night.
Yeah. Okay. Next question's from Paulie Shukalo, Paulie is going to be a member of the class of 2026, a future Green Knight. He wants to know, did you ever feel, Tommy, like you were not going to make it to the next level? And if so, what did you do when you felt that? You talked a lot about being honest with yourself. Was there ever that moment for you?
For sure. Pretty much at every level, if I can be frank about it. I mean, I think you go into every level hopeful that like, okay, this will be, it'll go as planned and I'll master it here and move on. And then you come up against struggle, or you come up against guys, you're like, oh my God, this guy is so talented. And how am I going to ever be able to hit that type of pitch, whatever it is. And you definitely fight that battle internally. And, I was no different. I know it's pretty much the oldest cliche in our game is I'm never going to get another hit again. You know what I mean? Even at the major league level, we still go through it. I mean, you're never going to outrun that. I mean, baseball, it's again, another cliche here, but baseball being a game of failure, you have to be able to hear the self-criticism that you're not going to make it. You're not going to be able to move on. You're not going to get past this without fully giving into it as though it's an automatic truth. It might just be some feedback that like, hey, this is not good enough. What we're doing right now is not working and we need to make our adjustments. But like, it doesn't mean that the whole thing is blown. And, it takes 4, 5, 6 times of hearing that commentary and giving into it and panicking, and to eventually overcome it where you're like, okay, now I can hear that voice without being so like, oh man, this is not going to work out the way I would have hoped. So I think just experience is the best teacher. You're going to fail. It's a part of the game, and to be able to fail and be frustrated and to hear the commentary in your head that you're not doing well enough without ultimately being so far taken in by it that you think it's just permanent.
Yeah. All right. Our next question comes from Chris Pinto Spiegel. Chris, a future Green Knight, class of 2026. He wants to know what else you did at St. Joe's, Tommy. What else did you participate in besides baseball that made the overall high school experience amazing for you?
One of the things that I loved was going to other guys' sporting events. That was so fun for me. I'd always go to the wrestling matches. I had a few buddies on the wrestling team, Jack Higallen, John Trimbetti, Rob Brito. And I loved going there and watching them perform their craft the same way that I worked so hard to get better at mine. I had like a real appreciation for how hard these guys worked to be good at what they did. And so that was something I always look forward to, going to the basketball games, going to the football games, the wrestling matches. Was like the camaraderie there really added to the experience. So I think that was one of the things that I look forward to the most.
Yeah, and that's the thing we talk about with these guys, that support system that hey, you're a baseball guy, you're going to see the wrestling match and the basketball games because those are where your brothers are from class and your buddies. Nowadays, as performing arts is such a big thing now. We've got football guys that go support the guys in the performing arts program because those are the guys they're sitting in science class with together, and they want to support them as brothers. And that's something that's been consistent since I was there in the 90s, you there in the mid 2000s, and still today in 2022. Andrew Riley has a question. He's a freshman, SJR class of 2025. He wants to know, going up through the minor leagues, playing A ball, double A, triple A, how long did it eventually take you to get to the major leagues, Tommy?
So I was drafted in 2011, and I went to what was like considered a full season team. Usually coming out of the draft, college guys have like a short season team that only goes for half the summer. I went right to low A in Rome, Georgia. Spent the back half of that season there. And then next year was high A in Lynchburg, Virginia. Next year was double A in Jackson, Mississippi. And then the following year was I spent 2 months in AAA in Gwinnett, Georgia. So I think, all in about 3.5 years in the minor league. So I was fortunate enough to move through it pretty quickly. I was older a little bit when I was drafted. I was 22. I was a redshirt junior. So I had, technically been in college for 4 years, where most guys are being drafted after their third season. So I think I spent about 3 years, and was lucky to get called up in 2014 with Atlanta.
All right. We'll keep going with our questions, Tommy. They are loaded and waiting for you to answer these these questions. Eduardo Pendas wants to know, what is a great question. What do you know now as a professional baseball player that you would have done differently when you were playing in high school?
That is a really good question. I'll think about that for a second. I think I would have better developed some tolerance for failure. I think it's hard. There's really no substitute for going out there and failing. And I think, like when you're playing Little League or you're playing these rec leagues, whatever it is, and in grade school, like you're probably going to be one of the better kids out there. And then you go to a program like St. Joe's where, the competition is much better, and you might not be right away anyway one of the better players out there. And it's tough to handle that failure initially when you don't have any experience doing it. And there is an art to handling failure, and we struggle with it all the way up through the minor league or the major leagues. I don't think you ever master it. I mean, some guys are certainly better than others. One guy that's coming to mind now is Freddie Freeman. I mean, that guy was so mind-blowing to me, just the way he handled himself daily. I mean, you could show up at any point in the game, and if you looked at Freddie Freeman, you would have no idea what type of day he was having. He could have been 3 for 3 with 2 doubles and a home run, and he's just sitting on the bench like this. And, he could be 0 for 3 with 3 punch outs and an error, and he's just sitting on the bench like this. So it's like, I think that type of even keel approach, not getting too high, not getting too low, I wish I would have paid more attention to that when I was in high school. I think it would have made it a lot easier on me.
That is fantastic advice for these guys. Really like that. Next question's from Stephen Carosa. Stephen is a varsity baseball player at St. Joe's, class of 2022. So this is it for Stephen, his final year. He wants to know, when you were in high school, and it may have been different back then, Tommy, but he wants to know, did high school come before club ball when you were back in high school?
As far as the priority?
Yeah.
I'd say it was kind of in that stage of transitioning to club taking the priority. As far as recruiting, I think, obviously high school ball still weighs largely as far as like colleges coming out to be able to see you in season as well. But yeah, it was kind of in that transition stage of club was becoming more important, going to camps and showcases and everything like that. So I did a little bit of that circuit. But that's the great thing about St. Joe's is it's such a strong program, so consistent that you're going to get that exposure even if you're not doing those extra leagues. I'm sure that most guys are at this point. But yeah, I did a little bit of it, but primarily high school.
Okay. All right. Joey Tamaro's got the next question. Joey is a freshman, class of 2025 at St. Joe's. He wants to know, Tommy, as a middle infielder that is physically on the smaller side, how can you get attention from colleges without putting out great scouting numbers, such as exit velocity and infield velocity?
It's a good question. And, I wish I had like a better answer than like it is difficult. It just is. The way scouting in the game is right now is, they are considering metrics like that more and more. One thing I might offer is just that, like, there are ways to train specifically for things like exit velocity and producing more power. I'm not, as you mentioned in the question, I'm not one of the bigger guys, but I feel like I've always been able to generate enough that it was, appealing for scouts and evaluators. But, they've gotten so good with the training now. There's a facility actually out here in Seattle that I'm fortunate enough to live close to called Driveline. Some of you guys might have heard of them. And, I've been working there for the last 3 weeks and have just been absolutely blown away with the measurables that they have and the tech that they have, hooking you up to all kinds of different body sensors, measuring your rotational speed, your exit velocity, and to really make it a conscious process to try and expand those numbers. Because, like it or not, if that's the way the game is going, and it clearly is, to take it upon yourself maybe to focus on those numbers, and you might not be what somebody else would be, but you can certainly max out what you could get to by focusing a little bit more on it as opposed to just like the feel of your swing, which is also important. But like we were saying, these guys are really focused on that as far as evaluating.
Interesting. And I want to ask you about, something that's of interest to you, and you're kind of relating to that. I bet the things you just spoke of, when you think back to high school, you had no idea about those different aspects. You were all the different stats and the scientific side of baseball now certainly wasn't around when I played at St. Joe's, and I don't know how it was for you, but you talked about expanding your mind a little bit and other interests. Tell the guys a little bit of interest in astrophysics. Am I getting that story correct there? That you're not just a one trick pony just focused on baseball. You've really expanded your mind a little bit, right?
I would try to. I'd say it's making up for lost time because I definitely didn't take academics in college as seriously as I should have, and I do regret it. So I feel like I'm kind of playing catch up on a lot of this stuff. But yeah, I mean, there are certain aspects of it that really interest me. I think physics is something that like is pretty fundamental in all movement. It's basically just kind of understanding how movement happens, and I think for me, when I'm organizing my swing and my mechanics, like it is helpful to understand how forces transfer from the ground up through the legs and how to rotate and coil energy and uncoil it, and it's all stuff that's applicable to my craft. So I think it's been helpful for me to kind of just and I'm not an expert in any of these things by any means, but to just have like some of the basics down has been pretty cool, and has definitely been helpful.
Yeah, very cool. We got a question from Joshua Silverman. Joshua is hopefully a future Green Knight in the next year. Joshua wants to know, what do you enjoy doing in the off season? You do get some time off, Tommy. What do you do in your free time?
I love to fish. I'm terrible at it. So I should start with that. But I really do enjoy it. It's so nice just being out on the water. My dad loves to fish. My brother loves to fish. So it's something that we've all kind of shared in for some time. Actually, not out here in Seattle, not far from the Puget Sound, where I caught like the biggest fish I ever caught. I actually had like one of those little things. I'm dropping the name of what they would be called right now, but you see hanging up there, king salmon, my fishing claim to fame. So yeah, I love to get out of the water anytime I can. Like I said, I'm pretty terrible at it, but I'm learning, and I definitely enjoy it.
Very cool. Did you get to eat that salmon?
I actually put it on, I think it's dry ice, and overnighted it to my family in New Jersey from Seattle. And they ate it the next day. They said it was some of the freshest salmon they'd ever eaten. So that's pretty cool.
What a show off. I mean, you catch this big fish, you send it home where we can't get any of that fresh fish like that. And that was a boss move with the family. Yeah, well done. We got another question coming in. This is anonymous here. Was it a big jump from high school ball to college ball? So you went from St. Joe's and first started at St. John's University. How big of a jump was that baseball wise?
It was a big jump. I think that the pitching is so much more consistent. The velocity, I think, is as you move up levels. I think that's the one thing as a hitter that stands out is just the velocity continues to increase. And whereas, like the back end of the guys, the back end of staffs or rotations or, don't usually have it as you go up, it's pretty consistent. I'd say that the jump from high school to college was just that. It was velocity and learning how to handle harder fastballs. But again, the great thing about St. Joe's is you're exposed to that type of talent pretty early on, and you're going to be seeing that in your inner squads and scrimmages with your own guys. And then, obviously there's some really good competition in the area too. So I think that was really important for me getting prepared for college was the competition I played against in high school.
Okay. So we've talked baseball, we've talked the mental side of the game. You've talked about recovery, training, preparation. What about nutrition, Tommy? These guys are at a very critical part of their development. They're maturing physically as young men at this point. Nutrition-wise, what advice do you guys have for these guys as they grow into themselves as not only athletes but young men at this point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really, really good question, and I think for me, I've dabbled in pretty much all the different diets and approaches at this point, at least a little bit. I want to say, I think right now, what I do for the last couple of years, I've been more into like the intermittent fasting. There's some really good literature out there on that. It's basically just restricting your eating window to about 6 to 8 hours every day. There's some good stuff out on it. I don't know how much I would recommend that for guys who are, as you mentioned, growing. I don't know that restricting calories would be beneficial there, but I think one of the things that like is a must is educating yourself, or at least going to somebody who is educated in nutrition and understanding your body type and the things that might be helpful for you, because everybody's different. So there's not really like this one size fits all for nutrition. Everybody's going to have things that they're, genetically predisposed to, or, certain strengths and weaknesses, and to identify those as early as possible definitely gives you a leg up. And it's where these things are headed, is, testing out these things earlier and earlier. That's definitely something I wish I would have experimented with sooner in my career.
Yeah. Did you think about it in high school, or were you, like many guys, running next door over to Phil's Pizza, or grabbing something from the bagel shop? I mean, how much did you even think about what you were putting in your body at that point?
I didn't really. I was more of a meathead. I mean, I was fortunate that my mom cooked pretty much 6 nights a week for us, and she was always very health conscious, and so I never really struggled with that at home. Certainly, as soon as you get your driver's license and you're able to hit Wendy's and McDonald's whenever you want, that changes a little bit. But yeah, I definitely wish I would have paid more attention to it at the time. I'm sure, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure that high school athletes are starting to pay more attention to it. And yeah, the sooner you can get into it, the better, because it's only going to continue to progress as you get into college. They're going to pay more attention to it. And then hopefully, if you're fortunate enough to make it to a professional league, like, they're going to be on you about it. So the earlier you can familiarize yourself with it and learn your body, definitely the better.
Yeah. All right, we got a couple more questions of our last few minutes here. Jace Ward, member of the class of 2025 at St. Joe's, wants to know, what would you consider, Tommy, the biggest thing a player needs to work on to make the baseball team at St. Joe's? Obviously, these guys have an experience, especially the freshmen, haven't experienced that being on that team yet. They have tryouts coming up probably towards the end of March is when we're looking at that. What's your advice when it comes to trying to make the baseball team?
I would say be well-rounded. I think there's, the talent at St. Joe's is obviously top notch in the area. And so, everybody's going to feel like they're the shortstop, and everybody is used to being the shortstop. And I think that there's only going to be one shortstop. So the ability to be flexible in your positioning, and to be able to handle multiple responsibilities, to be able to pitch, to be able to catch, whatever it is, just to be open to different possibilities for your career, and to not be so set in how you'd like for it to go, I think definitely gives the coaching staff more options. So one thing I would suggest is be well-rounded, be flexible, be willing to experiment in some different positions, whatever you have to do to get on the field, I think is going to be the aim.
Yeah. Versatility is a plus. That's a talent. That's for sure. That coaches, I'm sure, they notice, especially at tryouts. James Griglio, class of 2026, wants to know, Tommy, what was your favorite team growing up, and what was it like to go and play against that team at their stadium as a major leaguer?
It's funny. So I grew up a Yankee fan, and it's the last stadium that I haven't played in. So yeah, it's the only stadium I haven't played in. Played against the Yankees, at the home parks at the time. But the one time I was set to, because I've been in the NL the majority of my career. And the one time I was set to go play in Yankee Stadium was 2019 after I had fractured my leg. So I missed the trip. I missed the games. I actually went on the trip, and was able to be in Yankee Stadium, and I was rehabbing at the time. So I was taking BP and everything and just kind of taking it all in. But that is definitely on my career bucket list, is to get my first game in Yankee Stadium for sure.
Wow. Have you looked at the interleague schedule, when that'll match up? What year the Giants will travel to the Bronx?
I'm pretty sure it's, because COVID messed things up a little bit with like we were doing just kind of like regional play there for a minute. If I'm not mistaken, it won't be obviously this year. I think we're in the AL Central, but I think it could be next year, 2023.
All right.
Fingers crossed.
All right. So we're getting close.
Yeah.
We're getting close to living out that bucket list.
Yeah.
A couple more questions for you before we wrap up. Chris Pinto Spiegel, class of 2026, wants to know, um, were your teachers at St. Joe's able to kind of help you out, move stuff around? Were they understanding of your baseball schedule and the grueling work ethic that you had for baseball? Did they kind of work with you on that?
Absolutely. And I think, most kids at St. Joe's, are involved in something other than just the academics. You mentioned, drama and a bunch of other things that guys are doing there. So I think the teachers are very well versed in, offering additional support and whatever they need to in order to make sure that somebody's going to have the resources that they need to be successful in the classroom. And that was something, like, as I said earlier, that was so important to me, because the last thing you want to have happen is for academics to be a hurdle to your athletic career. And, academics are such an important part of being able to continue to go on and pursue your athletic career and to get into a good school and a reputable school. So I always felt that support at St. Joe's, that the teachers understood that we were after more than just that one thing, and they were definitely accommodating.
Okay. Yeah, we've got obviously tons of multi-sport athletes at St. Joe's, kids in the musical program. We have presidents of the class, community service, very active students. So the help of the faculty they help you balance that, and they know that you're doing a lot and you have a lot on your plate as a young student as well. So that certainly helps. Couple more. Jace Ward wants to know, what's the best thing you got out of St. Joe's, Tommy? If you could pinpoint one thing, I know you've talked about many aspects and you may have mentioned it already, but is there one thing that you think of St. Joe's and you've taken it with you all these years later?
One word always comes to mind. It's just brotherhood. That the environment there and the times that you have with those guys, like, they're still my best friends. I'm sitting here, I got my phone on the table, my group chat's blowing up right now, and like I can't wait to get in there and see what everybody's talking about. Like, in the most meaningful moments of my life, those are always the guys that are around, and like, it'll never not be that way. And I'm so thankful that I went to St. Joe's and met these guys and developed those friendships, because the bond that gets created there. And yeah, like a lot of the guys that I'm so close with, we play baseball together, but there are still plenty of other guys that I keep in touch with that are great friends that I didn't play baseball with. It's just the environment there, the atmosphere there, everybody's on the same team, everybody's on the same page. And it's such a special place.
Yeah. I think I've got one last question as we get ready to wrap things up. Amazingly, we fired through all those questions that were in our queue. One bit of advice, Tommy, could you give to a current Green Knight or many of those future Green Knights that are on here tonight? What bit of advice would you give them for this St. Joe's journey, athletically, academically? How would you advise these young guys?
I would say to lean on other people and go into it with other people when you need to. You're going to be surrounded by really like-minded individuals in this process, and when you need to, and you need some help or you need to ask a question, to do that, and to not think that you got to do it all by yourself. Even myself at this stage in my career, like, I still have the guys on my team that, I'll reach out to when I'm just, I'm playing negative tapes in my head about that error I just made or that strikeout I made. And I'll turn to Andrelton Simmons and be like, dude, tell me something good. You know what I mean? Like, where am I at right now? And he can help straighten me out, and I do the same for him. And to always have those guys that you can go to when you need a fresh take or you need a perspective, and you don't have to go through it by yourself, even though, yeah, it is definitely a solitary journey, but you're going through it with plenty of other people who are doing the same thing. And to lean on those people and to establish those relationships and that way of communicating with each other sooner rather than later, and you can develop a really nice support network around you. It's going to help.
Yeah, really is great advice, and especially at a place like St. Joe's, the community around these guys. You felt it, I felt it. Great advice, telling these guys to don't be scared to lean on the brothers that are around you, the faculty that care about you, the coaches that are there to support you. It's so important, and really should hit home with these guys as they're either on that journey right now, in the middle of it, or getting ready to start that journey as incoming freshmen. So I think that's where we'll wrap it up tonight. We're just about at an hour, which is perfect. Tommy, really appreciate the time tonight. Love connecting you with our St. Joe's community, these current Green Knights, these future Green Knights. I know as a fellow alum, this was special tonight to hear you share these stories and these advice with these guys, and for me as well. So we really appreciate the time, and we wish you the best of luck this season. Hopefully you guys are back on the field soon, and we can't wait to see you when you come swing through the New York area, whether it's with the Mets this year or possibly with the Yankees next year at Yankee Stadium. We will be certainly looking for you, Tommy. Thanks for being with us, man.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it. Thank you to everybody joining. I really enjoyed it.
All right, Tommy. We'll see you.
Take care.
Thank you, guys.